No, I am not doing the rhyme today. But if you want to put on 1812 Overture while you're watching this video, I will allow that. I'm not doing it, though. Hello, everyone. Britton here, also known as Smoky Dude, and happy Guy Fawkes Day. I'm 3 days late, but since I'm near, you know what it is. And I am doing a comic review, if my other references haven't clued you into what I am talking about today. It is Alan Moore and David Lloyd's V for Vendetta, the seminal dystopian comic that Alan and David Lloyd did in the 80s. Now, if you guys don't know already, you probably already do know that Alan Moore is one of my favorite authors of all time. He's in my top 3 favorite authors of all time, alongside Cormac McCarthy and Ray Bradbury. I absolutely adore Alan's work. I think he is a genius. A bit of a madman, considering his penchant for weirdness, and brilliant comic scribe. I think he has written some of the greatest comics of all time, and V for Vendetta is one of his best masterstrokes. Now, I will contend that Watchmen and Saga of the Swamp Thing are more polished works in terms of Moore's output in the 80s. This makes sense since V for Vendetta was one of the first long-running comics that Alan actually did alongside Miracle Man. And if you can see, with V for Vendetta, you see Alan Moore learning. The first few chapters, it kind of seems like Alan Moore is clearing his throat, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. And by the end of the series, we see him as a more confident creator at the top of his game. But even with the slow plot, I think V for Vendetta more than makes up for it with consistent tone, compelling characters, and a morally complex plot. You know, one of the things I've noticed about reading Alan Moore's comics every time I've read one of his comics is that his comics never feel like regular old comics that you read. Even when you read contemporaries of his, like Danny O'Neill or Frank Miller, even when you read them, and as great as they are, like, they still feel like your normal comic. With Alan Moore, it almost feels like you're reading a graphic novel, which I don't generally like that term, and Moore generally doesn't like that term. So I guess we're kindred spirits in that sense. But I really love how his comics, I love how he experiments with the form of comics. I mean, and I can't give him all the credit for that. I think David Lloyd's superb artwork really plays into that. I mean, if you can see the comic here, I have to hold it sideways in order to get a look. But here is some of David Lloyd's artwork alongside Alan Moore, and they are just playing with the form of comics. Of course, like I said, I can't entirely give Alan Moore the credit. I think David Lloyd's artwork really helps to create the gritty, bleak world of this dystopia. I love this. I really am intrigued by the scratching. Oh wait, this it's a little sexy time there. Let's see. There you go. Here's a better one of someone getting tortured because, you know, we're Americans. Yeah, I really loved, but being serious though, I really loved the scratchy colors. I originally, this was actually going to be in black and white, and when it was at Warrior, which was the comic imprint that Alan had worked for when he first started his career, it was originally in black and white, but they added color to it once it got to DC. And I really like how David's artwork has this really dark and grungy feel. The colors are very understated, and even when it gets to the really weird kind of psychedelic parts, there's still like this gritty, just grungy color style that I really enjoy about his work. And there's even points in this comic where I feel like I'm reading like a newspaper comic, if that makes any sense. I mean, the art looks a lot like a newspaper comic, if you know, that makes sense. And David Lloyd, he also came, and I mean, to be fair, David Lloyd came up with the infamous V costume. I mean, hold on, let me find V real quick. Yep, there he is. It was originally David Lloyd who came up with the costume for V, and Alan Moore just loved it so much he decided to go with it. I think what distinguishes V for Vendetta from other dystopian stories of its ilk is that it never really stoops to moralize to you. Alan Moore showcases a willingness to discuss his own beliefs, but also to challenge them, to show the flaws even of his ideology, because as he pointed out himself, he didn't really want to go into this works as an anarchist himself, saying, you know, oh, here's this anarchist, you know, V right here, and he's the good guy, and here's all these evil, bad fascists, because he felt that would be a disservice to the audience. And one of the things I like is that Moore is not afraid to show the fascists, so-called, even though they're really bad, they're still just regular people at the end of the day. And there's some of them who are even quite likable, and just go along because of, and they went along with this Norse Fire government, who are the, you know, bad guys of the book, because, rather it be because of cowardice, or just wanting to get on, or even, as Alan Moore would put it, a genuine belief in those principles, like Adam Susan, the leader of the crew of the Norse Fire Party, the basic Hitler of everybody. But even he gets some moments where you not necessarily sympathize with him, but you do feel pity for him, which I appreciate. It makes this world feel much more real. It's not so allegorical. It's not like something like 1984 or Brave New World, where there's just these big evil governments that are just overlooking that there are people running these governments. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not to say anything against 1984 or Brave New World. I think both of those are excellent stories. But I like how V for Vendetta has a lot of nuance with its characters and nuance with its philosophical and moral complexity. One of the things I enjoy in this book as well is that he does show how fascism is awful and terrible and why we shouldn't want it, but he also shows the sort of downsides of freedom as well. And Moore does in this book what he often does best, which is extending ideas to their logical conclusion. If I could say anything about this comic, what it's about, it's a study of extremes. I mean, of course authoritarianism is evil in all of its forms, but how much freedom is too much freedom? What would be the price of attaining true freedom? And what is that worth the price? And why does fascism seem so appealing, even though when you think about it, truly think about it for a second, it sounds awful? Well, V for Vendetta grapples with a lot of these themes and really does an interesting take on these. There's even some philosophical ideas discussed in this, such as the, I don't want to say noble savage in the way of like Native American stereotypes, but how it was originally intended. There's a book called Emilie from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he talked a lot about and it was basically, the book is a thought experiment. He's basically like, so here's this guy Emilie who does not know anything about our world, our customs, anything like that. And V for Vendetta really plays with that, especially towards the part when V does some really morally questionable stuff. But I was reminded of that as I read through this again recently, because I tend to read this on Guy Fawkes Day or during that time of the year. One of Moore's favorite themes that he likes to cover in his work is the power of symbols as well as the loss of humanity. And we really see that in this story through the character of V himself. V is no longer a person like you or I might be. He is an idea. As he says in the story, ideas are bulletproof. But instead of the movie where it's more of like a kick-ass one-liner, in this it's more of that he's given up being, he's committed so much to this idea, to this mask that he wears, that he's no longer a person. While we can understand his rage and his vengefulness, Moore isn't afraid to poke holes in V's motives as the story moves along. I mean, is he genuine in his crusade for anarchy and freedom, or is he just a madman using those things as excuses to hurt the people who hurt him? Does he really care about Evie, or is she just a pawn in his plans? And we don't really know, and that's what keeps it interesting, because Moore knows, as well as any great storyteller, that the question is far more interesting than the answer. And he never loses track of the characters in this story. There are also some pretty compelling side characters. I really liked Finch, the conflicted detective of the Norse Fire government. You can kind of tell he's not really down with the whole Norse Fire thing, but he definitely wants to help people as much as he can, even though this evil fascist government is basically doing all they can to squash the people down into bugs, basically. And I think Moore is very nuanced with his characterizations. Again, is it as good as something like Watchmen? No, but it's definitely very gripping stuff, and I really admire this comic a lot. I think Alan Moore and David Lloyd were really on to something when they made this. I think that's all I got for the comic for now. So I bet you guys are wondering what I think of the movie adaptation of V for Vendetta, starring Hugo Weaving, Natalie Portman, John Hurt is in it, the late great John Hurt, hilariously, who was in 1984 adaptation as Winston. Now he is the fascist dictator. I'm sure that was an in-joke. It had to have been. So what did I think of the movie? I liked it. I liked it a lot. It's one of those movies I kind of go back and forth about, because there's some things that bother me about the movie, but at the same time, I do think, and don't assassinate me if you're a big Alan Moore fan, but I do think it is the best of his adaptations. And to be fair, I don't think a lot of people would disagree with me on that point. Now, I do agree with what Alan Moore's criticisms are of the film. I know that he's not really a fan of having his stuff adapted. He's just kind of, he feels that they should stand on their own. But I really think that the V for Vendetta film is probably the best of the Moore adaptations we've gotten. Really loved Hugo Weaving as V. I loved him. He was fantastic. I think he was perfect for the role. He just killed it as V. He really captured that theatrical nature. He did make him a little more human than he is in the novel. I do wish that in the film they went for the more morally gray stuff that the original comic went for, but it kind of lacked that nuance. It's more like, oh, you should root for V and look at all these evil, scary fascists, you know? But for what it's worth, I still think it's a solid film. I think that, even though I am not a fan of the Wachowskis, I do think they did a very good job. And James McTeague, who directed this film, did a good job helming everything. Natalie Portman is also fantastic in the movie. I think she's really good as Evie. All the bad guys are really good. Stephen Ree plays Finch. He's very good in the film. The guy who plays Creedy I thought was awesome, even though Creedy was not as hard-boiled as the Creedy in the book. I thought he was good. It's just a solid film all around, and again, I think it is the best of Alan Moore adaptations, aside from the Watchmen series, the sequel series that they made a few years ago. I think this might be the best Alan Moore adaptation we've gotten so far. And I know Alan Moore might use his evil, he might use his weird occult magic on me to smite me, but you know what? I don't fucking care. I think that V for Vendetta is a solid film. I do think the comic is better. I think the comic is more nuanced. I think the comic has a much more interesting message about the nature of fascism, the nature of anarchy, and the fact that V isn't the hero of the story. It's actually Evie who's the hero of the story, because she manages to keep her humanity while V kind of lost it in his journey to take revenge and to take down this government. But I do like the film a lot. I think the film is really good. I think it's well shot, it's well acted. I like the action sequences. And, of course, Hugo Weaving was probably the best part of that damn movie. He was just fantastic. And to think that he did it after James Purefoy pulled out, and he comes in and only has about maybe 2 weeks to do it, and he did it. He killed it. I mean, that's an amazing actor, if you ask me. I think that the film is a very good adaptation, though again, I do think it's a little more good versus evil rather than a study of these two opposing philosophies and all of the extremes that can come from that. But that is all I got for today. I covered V for Vendetta from Alan Moore. If you guys liked this video, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Goodreads and Letterboxd, where I also write reviews that are probably more coherent than the one you just heard right now. And you can also find me on Discord if you want to come talk to me. My first Alan Moore review. I was a little nervous to do this. Did I do good? Did I do justice to this comic? Well, let me know. See you guys later. Bye-bye.